Have you ever lived a family drama so intense that it felt like a movie? This is not just another emotional storytelling video. This is a shocking twist that started inside my own home, with my stepmother, the woman who was supposed to protect me. One moment, I was in the middle of a confidential White House briefing, my heart pounding as national decisions were on the line. The next moment, the door slammed shut. My stepmother had locked me inside, her eyes burning with a mix of fear and control. She thought she was trapping me, silencing me, keeping her secret safe. But she didn't know mine. Outside, 6 black cars suddenly surrounded the building, engines rumbling, tension rising. I could feel the air tighten like the entire world was holding its breath. And in that single instant, the truth could no longer stay hidden. Why did she freeze? Why did her face turn pale? Because the person she tried to lock away wasn't just her stepson. I was someone with a secret identity, someone who had the power to change everything. This is not just a toxic family story. It's an emotional journey of betrayal, survival, and revelation. Stay with me, because the family secrets I'm about to share will shock you more than the locked door, more than the black cars, and more than the truth that shattered my stepmother's world. Family drama never begins with a single explosion. It starts with whispers, with glances, with invisible walls that grow higher every day. Living with my stepmother was like living in a house where every corner carried silent battles. At first glance, we looked like a normal family. Smiles for the neighbors, polite greetings at family dinners, photos on the mantle that painted a picture of harmony. But behind closed doors, the story was darker, sharper, and far more dangerous. My stepmother was a master of control. She wanted every detail of my life monitored. What I ate, where I went, who I spoke to, even the tone of my voice at the dinner table. To outsiders, she seemed caring, but to me, it felt like a cage, one carefully built from rules, manipulation, and subtle threats. She wasn't just jealous of my achievements. She was terrified of what I represented, a reminder that she could never fully own or control this family. The tension between us was constant. Every word became a test, every silence a battle. If I came home late, her questions were sharp daggers. If I succeeded at something, she would twist it into suspicion. "Why are you hiding things from me?" she would say, even when I wasn't hiding anything at all. But deep inside, I was hiding something she could never imagine, something that made her obsession even more dangerous. My father often stood on the sidelines, caught between loyalty and fear, between love and exhaustion. He never raised his voice, but his silence was louder than any argument, and his silence gave her more power. That power grew each day, and soon the house was no longer mine. It was hers, a kingdom ruled by suspicion, where I was the prisoner and she was the queen. There were moments when I thought I could break free, moments when I almost told her the truth about who I really was. But fear kept me quiet. Not fear of what she would do to me, but fear of what revealing my identity too soon could unleash. You see, secrets have weight, and mine was heavier than any she could carry. Her jealousy turned into paranoia. She searched through my room, checked my phone, even followed me when she thought I wasn't watching. Every time I caught her spying, her excuse was the same. "I just want to protect this family." But protection was never her goal. Control was. And in her eyes, control was survival. The atmosphere at home became toxic. It was like walking on broken glass, careful with every step, knowing that even the smallest mistake could draw blood. I remember one night vividly. She stood by my bedroom door, watching me without speaking, her shadow stretching across the floor. That silence, That gaze, it wasn't love. It was fear wrapped in obsession. I knew then that this wasn't just a stepmother's strictness. It was something deeper, darker. She was guarding something, and ironically, while she thought she was protecting her own secret, she had no idea that mine was far greater. This family drama wasn't just about arguments or jealousy. It was about power, identity, and survival. It was about a toxic home where every breath felt like a negotiation, every day a test of endurance. And it was the foundation for the moment when everything would collapse, when she would lock the door, when 6 black cars would surround the building, and when her world would shatter because of the truth I had been hiding all along. Before that terrifying moment inside the locked room, before the 6 black cars surrounded the building, my life looked almost ordinary from the outside. But like any toxic family, the cracks were hidden beneath the paint, and every day felt like walking deeper into a storm that only I could see coming. To neighbors, we were the picture of respectability. My father worked long hours, my stepmother smiled at block parties, and I carried myself like the polite, dutiful child. But the truth was more complicated. Inside our home, love was conditional, trust was non-existent, and every interaction carried the weight of unspoken suspicion. My stepmother ruled with subtlety. She wasn't the type to scream or throw plates. No, her weapons were whispers, half smiles, and quiet accusations. She could turn a simple question into a dagger. Why didn't you answer your phone? Who were you really with? Why are you hiding things from me? Her tone was calm, almost gentle, but the message was always the same. I don't trust you, and you should fear me. At first, I tried to ignore it. I focused on my studies, on my career, on building the secret life she could never imagine. But her control tightened the more I pulled away. She began to monitor my calls, my movements, even the way I looked at her during dinner. If I laughed at something she didn't understand, suspicion burned in her eyes. If I spent too much time in my room, she would knock, pretending to check in, while her gaze swept across my desk, my drawers, my laptop. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that every step I took outside that house was a step toward a destiny she was never meant to control. I carried responsibilities that went beyond family, beyond home, beyond her world entirely. And each day, balancing those 2 lives became more dangerous. There were nights when I would sit in silence, the glow of my computer screen reflecting secrets I couldn't share. Reports, encrypted messages, meetings that mattered far more than anything she accused me of hiding. My double life weighed on me, but I couldn't reveal it, not yet. The time wasn't right, and the wrong word at the wrong moment could undo everything I had built. Meanwhile, her paranoia grew sharper. She would question my father endlessly about me, planting seeds of doubt in his mind. He's hiding something, she would whisper when she thought I wasn't listening. He doesn't respect this family. He's up to something dangerous. My father rarely responded, but his silence gave her license to push further. The toxic atmosphere wasn't just about arguments, it was about erosion. My freedom eroded a little more each day. My privacy, my peace, my sense of safety. She made the walls of that house feel smaller and smaller, as if she could suffocate me into submission. And yet, through it all, I stayed calm. I knew who I was. I knew what I was preparing for. My secret wasn't just about survival. It was about duty. I wasn't the helpless stepson she believed she could control. I was something more, someone stronger, someone who had a role to play far beyond her imagination. The tension reached its peak in small, almost forgettable moments. A locked drawer I found moved. A notebook I left hidden that mysteriously appeared on my desk. A conversation she had with a stranger that stopped the moment I entered the room. Each clue pointed to the same truth. She was watching me just as closely as I was watching her. I remember one night especially. She sat across from me at the dinner table, her fork untouched, her eyes fixed on me like a predator studying prey. And then she smiled, a smile so soft it should have been comforting, but it sent a chill down my spine. "One day, I'll know everything," she whispered, as if it were a promise. In that moment, I realized the confrontation was inevitable. She would push, and I would push back. She thought she was close to discovering my secret. She thought she held all the power. But what she didn't understand was that her world was about to collide with mine. And when it did, nothing would ever be the same again. The night before the White House briefing, I barely slept. My stepmother's words still echoed in my mind. Her promise that she would one day know everything, but there was no time for fear. The briefing wasn't just another meeting. It was history in motion, and I was at the center of it. When I walked into that room, the air felt electric. Advisors shuffled through files, screens flickered with intelligence updates, and the weight of responsibility pressed down on every shoulder. I sat at the long table, my notes precise, my voice steady, but inside, I was carrying a storm. My personal family drama didn't belong here, yet it followed me like a shadow. As I spoke, presenting strategies and updates, I could feel eyes on me. Not just the eyes of colleagues and leaders, but the imagined gaze of my stepmother, her suspicion crawling under my skin even as I tried to focus on national security. For a brief moment, I convinced myself it was paranoia, that she couldn't possibly interfere with something this important. I was wrong. The meeting had just reached a critical point when it happened. A sudden click, a metallic sound that didn't belong in the heart of Washington's most secure building. The door behind me slammed shut, harder than it should have. Heads turned. My words froze mid-sentence. And then I saw her, my stepmother. She stood at the doorway, her face pale but determined, her hand still on the lock as if she had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that chills the air and makes every breath sound like thunder. She had no clearance, no reason to be there, and yet she had broken into the heart of power with a single purpose: to trap me. "Sit down," she whispered, though her voice carried across the entire room. Her eyes locked on mine, filled with a mix of fear, desperation, and something darker: control. Every second stretched into eternity. My colleagues shifted uneasily, unsure if this was a security breach or a personal nightmare spilling into the professional world. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My mind raced with questions. How did she get in here? How did she bypass security? And why now? But deep down, I already knew. She had been waiting for this, watching me, following me, piecing together fragments of my hidden life until she reached the door I thought she would never open. This was her moment of power, her chance to corner me, to force me to reveal everything. And then, as if the universe wanted to amplify the chaos, I heard the low growl of engines outside. Not one, not two, but several. The walls trembled faintly with the vibration. I didn't need to look to know what it was: the arrival of 6 black cars surrounding the building like silent predators. Gasps filled the room. Phones buzzed with alerts. Advisors exchanged nervous glances. My stepmother's grip on the lock tightened, but for the first time, her expression shifted. That mask of control cracked just slightly, and fear seeped through. She thought she had trapped me, but the truth was, she had trapped herself. By barging into the White House briefing, by locking me inside, she had crossed a line she could never return from. And though she didn't understand the meaning of those black cars, I did. They weren't just here for protection. They were here because of me. I met her eyes across the room, and for a moment, we were the only two people in the world. She wanted answers. She wanted control. But what she saw instead was something she had never imagined. Calm, quiet power staring back at her. That was the beginning of the confrontation that would change everything. The toxic family drama that had poisoned my home had now invaded the highest halls of power. And the question that hung in the air was no longer just about family. It was about identity, truth, and survival. The sound came first, a low, guttural growl that made the windows tremble. It wasn't thunder, and it wasn't coincidence. Everyone in the room froze as the vibration deepened, building into a chorus of engines that seemed to come from every direction. I didn't need confirmation. I knew what was happening. 6 black cars had surrounded the building, their presence undeniable, their message clear. This wasn't just a family conflict anymore. My colleagues scrambled, whispering urgent commands into phones, eyes darting between the locked door and the flickering monitors. Security alerts flashed on the screens, but I couldn't look away from her. My stepmother's fingers gripped the lock as though her entire life depended on it. For the first time, the confidence that fueled her control began to crumble. Outside, the engines roared louder, then fell into silence. That silence was worse than the noise. It was suffocating, heavy, the kind of silence that tells you predators are waiting, calculating, closing in. Shadows shifted through the frosted windows. Dark suits, trained movements, precision. These weren't random visitors. These were professionals, and they were here for me. Inside the room, tension spiraled into chaos. Some advisors shouted for evacuation. Others demanded answers. But she, my stepmother, remained fixated on me as though none of them existed. Her eyes trembled with a mix of rage and fear. "You can't keep lying to me," she hissed under her breath, though everyone heard her. "I know you're hiding something, and I'm not letting you leave until you tell me the truth." Her voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw not just control, but desperation. She had risked everything to force this confrontation. Her reputation, her safety, even her sanity. And yet, she didn't understand the weight of the world she had stepped into. This wasn't a family dinner where she could manipulate silence into submission. This was the White House. And those 6 black cars outside weren't negotiators. They were enforcers. Every second felt like the tightening of a noose. My pulse pounded, but my expression stayed calm. I couldn't afford panic. Not now, not ever. Around me, the room swirled with confusion, but my mind was locked onto one truth. The secret I carried was about to break free, whether I wanted it to or not. Then came the sound of boots on pavement, synchronized, unrelenting. 6 car doors slammed shut in perfect rhythm. The building seemed to inhale, bracing for impact. My stepmother's face turned pale as the echoes crept closer, her breath shallow, her body stiff. She had thought she was the predator, but now she was cornered prey. Someone pounded on the locked door from the outside. "Open it! Now!" The voice was firm, commanding, the kind of voice that brooks no hesitation. My stepmother flinched, her hand trembling against the lock. But she didn't move. She looked at me, eyes wild, and whispered, "Tell me the truth before they do. Tell me who you really are." For a heartbeat, everything stopped. The pounding, the whispers, even the hum of electricity. My world and hers collided in that instant. The toxic family drama that had haunted me for years now stood exposed beneath the blinding spotlight of national power. I leaned forward slowly, my voice low but steady. "You don't want the truth," I said, my words slicing through the tension. "Because once you know it, nothing will ever be the same again." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She was shaking now, her control slipping like sand through her fingers. The pounding on the door grew louder, more urgent. Outside, the black cars remained a silent wall of power, waiting for the signal to act. The room had become a battlefield. Fear against authority, obsession against identity, stepmother against stepson. And though she still held the lock, I held something greater. The truth that could shatter her world in an instant. The next move would decide everything. The pounding on the locked door grew louder, each thud echoing like a countdown. But inside the room, time seemed frozen. My stepmother's hand shook on the lock, her knuckles white, her breath uneven. She wasn't the calculating woman who had ruled our home anymore. She looked like someone standing on the edge of a cliff, terrified of what lay below. Her eyes locked on mine. "Tell me," she demanded, though her voice cracked. "Tell me who you really are." I didn't answer right away. Silence was a weapon, and I let it stretch, pulling every gaze in the room toward us. Advisors exchanged worried glances. Security pounded harder on the other side of the door. And still, I held her with nothing but calm. "You don't want the truth," I said quietly, "because once you hear it, your world will fall apart." She flinched as though my words struck her physically. "Don't play games with me," she snapped, but her bravado was slipping. Her voice trembled at the edges, betraying the fear beneath. "I've seen the signs, the late nights, the calls you never explained. I know you're hiding something dangerous. If you think you can keep it from me, you're wrong." Her desperation filled the room like smoke. For years, she had thrived on control of the house, of my father, of every detail of my life. But now, she had locked herself into a room she couldn't control. I leaned forward, my voice low but steady. "You want to know the truth? Fine. The truth is bigger than you. Bigger than me. Bigger than this family drama you've been clinging to like it's the center of the universe." Her lips trembled, but she pressed on. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Why are those cars outside? Why do they listen to you?" The room fell silent again. Even the pounding on the door seemed to fade, as if the world itself waited for my answer. My colleagues stared, unsure whether to intervene or watch the unraveling of something far more personal than politics. Finally, I spoke. "I'm not the helpless child you thought you could manipulate. I'm not just your stepson. I carry responsibilities you could never imagine. And those cars outside, they're not here for you. They're here because of me." Her eyes widened, the color draining from her face. She stumbled back a step, as though the truth was a blow she hadn't braced for. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, that's impossible. You're lying. You're just—" "Just what?" I interrupted sharply. "Just a boy you thought you could control? Just a pawn in your game of power? You were so obsessed with uncovering my secrets that you never considered what would happen if you actually found out." Her breathing quickened. The woman who once loomed over me in the quiet of our toxic home now looked small, fragile, broken by a reality she couldn't control. Why didn't you tell me? She asked suddenly, her voice raw. Why keep me in the dark? I studied her carefully. For a fleeting moment, I almost saw something human beneath her obsession. Fear, vulnerability, maybe even regret. But it was too late. Because you were never meant to know, I said simply. And because the moment you tried to control me, you proved you couldn't be trusted with the truth. Her hands slipped from the lock. For the first time, she looked defeated, her eyes darting between me and the pounding door. The control she had built her life upon was gone, replaced by the unbearable weight of the truth she had forced into the open. The banging on the door grew louder, more urgent now. A voice shouted, "Stand back! We're coming in!" My stepmother's gaze snapped back to me. Fear consumed her face. She whispered one last time, almost pleading, "Please, tell me everything before they do." I held her eyes, calm in the storm. "You wanted the truth," I said. "You'll have it, but it won't come the way you expect." And with that, the lock rattled violently, the door about to burst open. The confrontation inside the room was over, but the real revelation was only just beginning. The lock finally gave way. The heavy door swung open with a crash, and armed security poured into the room, their presence sharp, decisive, and undeniable. The 6 black cars outside had delivered their message. This was no ordinary disruption. This was a crisis with national consequences. Advisors shouted orders, radios crackled with urgency, and in the center of the chaos stood my stepmother, frozen. Her hands trembled at her sides, her eyes wide with disbelief. She had forced me into this confrontation, demanded answers, and now the truth she had chased for years stood one breath away from shattering everything she thought she knew. I rose slowly, every eye in the room fixed on me. My colleagues knew enough to remain silent, but the weight of their stares pressed heavily on my shoulders. My stepmother stumbled back, her voice breaking into a whisper. "Who are you? What have you been hiding?" I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who had tried to control every detail of my life. The woman who had reduced me to suspicion and silence. The woman who thought she held all the power. And then, with a steady voice that cut through the chaos, I gave her the answer she never expected. "I wasn't just your stepson. I was a senator." The words dropped like a hammer, silencing the room, echoing louder than the pounding of boots or the roar of engines. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some of the advisors nodded, as though confirming what they already knew but could never say aloud. My stepmother's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing, as if she had forgotten how to breathe. "Of a senator?" she stammered. That's impossible. You're too young. Too young?" I interrupted, my tone sharp but calm. "Too hidden, too quiet, too underestimated. That was the point. My identity wasn't a weakness, it was protection. I lived 2 lives, one under your roof and one in the halls of power. And you were too busy trying to control me to see the truth standing right in front of you." Her knees buckled slightly, and she gripped the edge of the table for support. "All those late nights, the calls you wouldn't explain? They weren't secrets meant to hurt you," I said, my voice steady. "They were responsibilities bigger than this family drama you tried to trap me in. While you searched my room and questioned my loyalty, I was shaping decisions that affected millions of lives. And you thought you could lock that away with a door and a key?" Tears welled in her eyes, though whether from shock, fear, or regret, I couldn't tell. The woman who once loomed over me in judgment now looked smaller than ever, crushed under the weight of a truth too heavy to deny. Around us, Security moved with precision, clearing the room, ensuring control. Yet the real battle wasn't with them. It was here, between me and her. You wanted power, I told her softly. But power was never yours to take. You wanted to uncover my secret, but you weren't prepared for the truth. And now you see it. You see me, not as the child you thought you could manipulate, but as the leader you could never control. She shook her head, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Why didn't you tell me? Because trust is earned, I answered. And you spent years breaking it. You wanted control, not understanding. You wanted submission, not truth. And that's why you were never meant to know. The room was silent again, but not with fear. This time, it was reverence. The advisors bowed their heads slightly, acknowledging the authority that had been revealed. The 6 black cars outside remained still, but their presence was no longer a mystery. They weren't here because of a threat. They were here because of me. My stepmother collapsed into a chair, her entire world unraveling. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one trapped. She was. Trapped by the truth. Trapped by the realization that everything she thought she controlled was nothing compared to the power she had tried to cage. And as I stood in that room, my secret exposed, I knew there was no going back. The confrontation was over, but the fallout had just begun. The room slowly emptied, the storm of chaos giving way to silence. Security filed out, advisors whispered among themselves, and the 6 black cars outside idled like sentinels, steady and unshaken. I remained standing, watching as my stepmother sat hunched in the chair, her hands trembling, her eyes glazed with disbelief. For years, she had been the one holding power over me. She had created a toxic home where suspicion was currency and control was survival. But now, the roles were reversed. She wasn't the queen of this story anymore. She was a woman who had gambled everything to uncover a secret and lost. I took a deep breath, my voice softer than before. This doesn't have to be the end of us, I said. But you have to understand, family is built on trust, not control. You wanted answers, but you never asked with love. You wanted the truth, but you never earned it. She looked up at me, eyes red, lips trembling. I only wanted to protect what was mine. I shook my head gently. That's where you went wrong. Family isn't something you own. It's something you nurture. You tried to build a kingdom of obedience, but all you created was fear. And fear always breaks. Her shoulders sagged, the weight of my words pressing down on her. For the first time, I saw not the stepmother who had haunted my childhood, but a woman consumed by insecurity, trapped in her own need for control. In that moment, I felt not anger, but something closer to pity. The truth was out. My identity as a senator had been revealed. The 6 black cars outside would continue to follow me, not as a threat, but as protection. My colleagues would carry forward the briefing. History would keep turning, and the world would move on. But she, my stepmother, would be left to wrestle with the truth that power built on fear can never last. Later that night, when the halls of the White House grew quiet again, I walked outside. The cool air wrapped around me, carrying with it a strange sense of freedom. For so long, I had lived between 2 worlds, the hidden life of duty and the suffocating walls of a toxic home. Now they had collided. The confrontation was over, and I stood stronger because of it. I thought about the lesson buried in all of this. We often imagine family as unconditional love, but the truth is, family can also be the deepest source of wounds. When control replaces trust, when suspicion replaces love, The scars can last a lifetime, and yet, even in the darkest drama, there's a chance to rise, to claim your truth, to walk out stronger than you ever believed. To anyone listening to this story, remember, you are not defined by the people who try to cage you. You are not trapped by the toxic patterns of your family. You carry within you the power to step into your own identity, no matter how shocking, no matter how hidden it may have been. My stepmother's face will always haunt me, not because of what she did, but because of what she lost. In her desperate attempt to control, she lost the chance to know me, the real me, before the world did. She lost the chance to be part of my truth instead of fighting against it. As I left that building, the black cars rolling quietly behind me, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. The family drama was no longer a prison. It was a story. A painful, emotional story, but one that carried a lesson worth sharing. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point of every struggle. Not to remain trapped in fear, but to turn it into something greater. A story of survival, a story of truth, a story that reminds us all that even when family fails us, we can still rise, stronger and unbroken.